first time I realized my husband was lying to me, I was already married to him. The second time, I was already trapped. People like to believe monsters announce themselves. They don't. They arrive with clean hands, polite smiles, and a version of love that feels steady enough to lean on. That's how I fell. Not fast, not foolishly, carefully, deliberately. I married a man I thought I knew. I was wrong. I met Daniel at a bookstore cafe. That detail matters because it sounds safe. It sounds like the kind of beginning people trust. He reached for the same copy of a novel I'd already read twice. He smiled and apologized. He listened when I spoke. He didn't rush me. We dated for a year. Exactly 1 year. Long enough to feel reasonable. Long enough for friends to stop asking if I was sure. Long enough for me to believe consistency meant character. He never raised his voice, never drank too much, never hit walls or slammed doors. That's important too. He didn't look like a warning sign. He proposed quietly, at home. No audience, no spectacle, just a ring, a steady voice, and a promise that sounded like safety. I said yes because nothing in my body told me no. Looking back, that's the most frightening part. Marriage didn't change him right away. That's another lie people tell. Watch how they act after the wedding. He stayed patient, attentive, predictable. Predictability is dangerous when you mistake it for transparency. There were small things, gaps, questions that didn't land anywhere solid. He didn't like visitors. Not strongly, just enough to discourage them. He worked remotely, but never explained what he actually did. He had a house he inherited from family, somewhere rural that I never saw. When I asked, he smiled. When I pressed, he deflected. When I stopped asking, he relaxed. That should have told me everything. The first real crack came 8 months in. I found a phone that wasn't his phone. It was turned off. No notifications, no SIM card, no photos. Nothing to trace. I held it in my hand and felt the weight of it. Too deliberate to be accidental. When I asked him about it, he didn't panic. That was his mistake. He said, "Old work device. I keep it in case." I said, "In case of what?" He said, "Exactly." Then he kissed my forehead and went to make dinner. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, because I felt watched in a way that had no direction. Like the room itself was listening. The second crack came when he took me to the woods. He framed it as a surprise, a weekend away. "No signal," he said cheerfully. "Just us." I didn't want to go. I can say that now without apologizing for it. I didn't want to go, but I went anyway. We drove for hours. Roads narrowed, signs disappeared. My phone lost signal exactly when he said it would. I remember noticing how calm he looked as the world thinned out around us. The house wasn't visible from the road. You had to know where to turn. Gravel, trees, a long drive that curved just enough to make retreat inconvenient. It was old, maintained, too clean to be abandoned, too isolated to be normal. Inside, everything was prepared. Food stocked, beds made, doors solid. I asked, "Who lived here before?" He said, "No one who matters now." That was the first time his voice didn't match his face. I didn't disappear all at once. That's another thing people misunderstand. There's no single moment where freedom snaps. It erodes, quietly, methodically. He started locking doors at night. He took my phone for safekeeping. He framed every restriction as concern. "You're tired. You're confused. You should rest." I argued. I cried. I demanded answers. He listened. Then he waited. The first time I tried to leave, he caught me before I reached the car. He didn't grab me. He didn't hit me. He stood in front of the door and said calmly, "You're not thinking clearly." I remember the way the words landed. Not loud, not cruel, absolute. When I tried to push past him, that's when I saw it. Enjoyment. Not excitement. Not anger. Control. The basement door was behind a shelf. Hidden, but not cleverly. Hidden like something you don't expect to be challenged. I didn't see it at first. I heard it. Breathing that didn't belong to either of us. I froze. He didn't. He watched my face change. watched understanding arrive. "Don't," I said. That was all I had left. He moved the shelf aside. The stairs were narrow. The light was already on. That's where the others were. Not screaming, not begging, waiting. That's when I understood the truth I had avoided for a year. I didn't marry a man who became a monster. I married a monster who had been waiting. I don't remember everything that happened after that. Trauma edits memory. It keeps what it needs and discards the rest. I remember this clearly, though. When the door closed behind me, it wasn't the sound of a prison. It was the sound of a decision he'd already made long before he met me. And I knew, with a clarity that still burns, that survival was no longer about escape. It was about timing. The first rule of that house was silence. Not because he demanded it. He never had to. Silence lived there already, settled into the walls like dust, the kind you don't see until light hits it just right. The basement smelled like earth and disinfectant, not rot, not blood. That would have been easier to process. This place was maintained, curated. That realization was worse than chaos would have been. There were 4 rooms, maybe 5. I didn't see them all at first. He didn't shove me inside. He guided me, a hand at my back, a voice low and patient, like he was showing me a guest room. "You'll be safe here," he said. That word, safe. I almost laughed. Almost. The door closed with a soft click. Not a slam, not anger, precision. I learned quickly that panic wastes oxygen. The others already knew that. Their eyes told me everything before their mouths did. 2 women, 1 man. All alive, all quiet. No chains, no cages, just doors that locked from the outside. That's another myth people cling to. That captivity looks violent. It doesn't have to. Control is cleaner when it doesn't leave marks. Time blurred fast. There were no windows, no clocks. Meals arrived on schedule. Water was always clean. Beds were real beds. Blankets washed. Wounds tended. He didn't want us broken. He wanted us contained. That distinction matters. The first night, I tried to stay awake. I thought vigilance might save me. It didn't. Exhaustion is a collaborator you don't get to refuse. When I woke, someone had covered me with another blanket. I don't know why that terrified me more than neglect would have. He visited once a day, sometimes twice, never rushed, never emotional. He spoke to us like a teacher correcting students who hadn't studied enough. He used our names. I hadn't told him mine. One of the women, older than me, hollow-eyed but sharp, caught my look and gave the smallest shake of her head. Don't react. Don't ask. Don't give him anything. I learned her name later. For now, she was just the woman who still understood strategy. The house above us was quiet most of the time. When it wasn't, it was controlled noise. Music at low volume, footsteps measured, doors opening and closing exactly when expected. Routine was his favorite weapon. I tested boundaries, carefully. I asked questions that sounded harmless. I moved things just slightly. I watched his reactions more than I listened to his answers. He noticed everything. He commented on nothing. That's how I knew the rules weren't flexible. The second woman barely spoke. Younger, eyes always fixed on the floor. She flinched when he entered, even when he smiled. The man kept his distance from all of us. Not out of threat, out of resignation. He'd been there the longest. I could tell by the way hope had already calcified into something heavier. They weren't broken, they were managed. That night, after he left, the older woman sat beside me. "Don't cry," she said quietly. "It's loud." I hadn't realized tears made sound. "You're new," she continued. "So listen." She told me the schedule, the rules, what earned attention, what earned isolation. "What about escape?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "No one leaves alone." That sentence lodged itself somewhere deep and stayed there. I didn't sleep much after that. Not because I was afraid, because my mind was already working. Fear wants you small. Survival wants you precise. And somewhere between those basement walls, I stopped thinking like a wife. I started thinking like someone who intended to outlive him. Down there, beneath the house, there was no point pretending, no future to impress, no audience to manipulate. Whatever we were before, we'd been reduced to habits and instincts, to what we did when no one was watching. That's how I learned who they really were. The woman who spoke first was Mara. She waited 3 days before giving me her name, long enough to decide I wasn't reckless, long enough to decide I might last. "I don't say it when he's around," she told me. "Names invite ownership." I understood immediately. Names are anchors. If you let someone else hold them, they can drag you anywhere. The younger one was Lila. She barely looked at me at first. Her body was present, but her attention lived somewhere far away, like she'd folded herself inward to survive. She slept curled tight, knees to chest, arms wrapped around her ribs as if she were holding herself together by force. When she finally spoke, her voice startled me. It didn't match her eyes. Too young, too intact. "Winter," she said, when I asked how long she'd been there. She didn't say which one. I didn't ask again. The man was Owen. He didn't offer his name at all. Mara gave it to me later, quietly, like passing contraband. "He's been here the longest," she said. Long enough to stop reacting. Owen kept to the edges of the room. He never sat with his back to the door. His hands were scarred in old, purposeful ways. Someone who had built things once, fixed things. Someone who knew how systems worked. That mattered. We didn't talk much at first. Not because we didn't want to, because we were listening. You learn fast in a place like that. You learn how silence can be used as cover. How words can be traced back to you. How attention, any attention, is currency. He came down once a day, sometimes more. Never on a strict schedule, but never randomly either. Predictable unpredictability. Enough to keep us alert without letting us plan. He didn't shout, didn't threaten, didn't touch unless he chose to. That restraint wasn't mercy. It was discipline. Mara taught me the unspoken rules. Never rush toward the door when it opens. Never ask the same question twice. Never thank him for food. Never cry where he can see it. "He likes gratitude," she said flatly. "And he likes despair. Don't give him either." Lila learned that lesson the hard way. The first week I was there, she whispered thank you when he set her plate down. Her voice shook. Her eyes stayed lowered. He smiled at her for a long time. After that, she stopped speaking entirely. Owen spoke to me at night, when the others slept or pretended to. "You're counting," he said once, barely audible. I didn't deny it. "Good," he replied. "Just don't do it out loud." There was no comfort in his voice, just confirmation. He told me small things, where the floor creaked upstairs, how many locks he'd heard turn on the basement door, which pipes carried sound. He never framed it as hope. He framed it as information. That was smarter. The truth settled in slowly, like cold. No one had escaped before. Not because they hadn't tried, because they'd tried alone. That was the design flaw. Not in the house, in us. Isolation made us manageable. Separation kept us quiet. But now, there were 4 of us. And he hadn't planned for coordination. He tested us separately. That's where his confidence slipped. He called me upstairs one afternoon. Just me. No warning. The house above ground felt wrong. Too open, too normal, clean surfaces, neutral colors, no evidence of the lives hidden below. He offered me tea. I accepted it because refusing would have been a reaction. "You're adjusting," he said. "Better than most." "I don't have a choice," I answered. He smiled, calm, interested. "You always have choices," he said. "You just don't control the outcomes." That was the closest thing to honesty he ever offered me. He asked about my marriage, about how long it took before I noticed something was wrong. I answered carefully. Not the truth, not lies, a version shaped to satisfy curiosity without feeding it. I watched him while I spoke. He wasn't aroused by the story. He wasn't angry. He was studying process, patterns, timelines. That's when I understood something vital. He wasn't interested in victims. He was interested in transitions. The moment people stopped being protected, the moment control transferred. When I went back downstairs, Mara took one look at my face. "What did he want?" she asked. "To understand how long it takes," I said. She nodded. "He always does." That night, something shifted between us. Not hope. Not yet. Alignment. We didn't say it out loud. We didn't need to. But we all understood the same thing now. No one was leaving that house by accident. And if anyone left at all, it would be because we stopped being individuals trapped together and became something coordinated enough to break him. Control doesn't need instructions when it's designed properly. That was the brilliance of the house. There were rules, but no list. No warnings on the wall. You learned them the way animals learn electric fences, by watching what happens when someone gets too close. We learned fast. Mara was the reference point. She'd already paid for most of the lessons. When she shifted, we shifted. When she went quiet, we followed. When she spoke, it was because the risk had already been measured. Lila watched Mara like a compass. Owen watched the room. I watched him. The punishments were subtle. That's what made them effective. No screaming, no violence we could point to later and say that was the moment. He believed in correction, not cruelty. Correction lasts longer. Miss a cue, and the lights stayed off longer than usual. Show too much resistance, and meals arrived cold. Ask the wrong question, and someone didn't come down that day. Isolation was his favorite adjustment. Temporary, controlled, just long enough to remind you that solitude was conditional. When Lila disappeared for 2 days, we didn't panic. We counted. When she came back, she didn't speak for a week. She didn't need to. We started communicating without words. Positioning meant everything. Sitting closer than usual meant watch the door. Turning your body slightly meant he's listening. Touching your own wrist meant time. The system grew quietly, organically. He noticed the calm. He always noticed the calm. "You're settling," he said one evening, standing just inside the doorway. "That's good." None of us replied. He waited. Then he smiled and left. That was the night Owen spoke more than 2 sentences. "He thinks equilibrium means surrender," he said. "It doesn't." "No," I replied. "It means readiness." We began to understand the house. The generator cycled every 6 hours. Water pressure dipped slightly before it cut off upstairs. The basement door had 3 locks, not 2. Mara knew where the spare keys were kept. Not access, just location. "Knowing isn't the same as having," she warned. "I know," I said, "but it's the first step." He started testing loyalty. That was new. He'd call one of us upstairs and return us with something small. A book, a sweater, extra food, a favor disguised as kindness. He was teaching us scarcity economics. Reward individual compliance. Fracture group cohesion. It almost worked. Leela brought back a blanket once. Thicker than the others. Cleaner. She held it like it was proof of something dangerous. Mara met her eyes and shook her head. That night, Leela folded the blanket and placed it in the center of the room. No one used it. The next day, the blanket was gone. He didn't comment, but his visits increased after that. He tried conversation with me again. "You're different," he said. "You organize people." "I don't," I replied. "I observe." "Same thing," he said lightly. "That was a mistake. Observation doesn't threaten control. Leadership does." He was telling me what he feared without realizing it. The first real fracture came with the man who didn't exist. One night, while we were counting footsteps upstairs, we heard another set. Heavier, slower, unfamiliar. Owen froze. "That's not him," he whispered. We waited. The steps crossed the house, paused, left. The next day, one of the rooms was empty. The man who had been there before me, the one who never spoke, was gone. No explanation, no sound, no blood, just absence. That's when reality sharpened. We weren't just being contained. We were being curated. Mara sat down hard that night. "They don't all stay," she said. "I didn't want to tell you yet." "Where do they go?" Lila asked, barely audible. Mara didn't answer. She didn't have to. I felt something cold settle into place, a clarity that cut through fear and replaced it with urgency. "This isn't indefinite," I said quietly. "It's staged." Owen nodded. "Selection," he said. "Not storage." That changed everything, because if the house was a system, then it had outputs, and systems can be disrupted, not by panic, by precision. That night, for the first time, we didn't just plan survival, we planned interruption. You don't notice how quiet someone has become until they almost disappear. Lila had been fading for days. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would trigger alarm. Just thinning. Less movement. Less breath. Like she was learning how to take up less space than her body required. That's how he liked them when he decided they were ready. I saw it before the others did. Not because I was smarter, because I knew the look. I'd seen it in mirrors long before the woods. The moment when endurance stops being strength and starts becoming surrender. He came for her that night. Not immediately. He lingered. Let us hear him unlock the door. Let us register the choice. Lila, he said gently. She stood without protest. That was the most dangerous part. When the door closed behind them, Mara swore under her breath. A single word. Sharp. Controlled. Owen went rigid. I didn't move. Movement wastes time when what you need is clarity. She won't come back the same, Mara said quietly. She might not come back at all, Owen added. Neither of them was speculating. They were remembering. Lila returned just before morning. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She walked straight to the corner farthest from the door and sat down with her knees drawn up, eyes empty in a way that wasn't shock. It was compliance. That scared me more than hysteria ever could. I sat beside her slowly. No sudden movements. No questions. After a long time, she whispered, "He says I can leave." No one spoke. "He says I just have to stay with him upstairs," she continued. "That I don't have to be afraid anymore." There it was. The lie dressed as mercy. Mara leaned forward. "Did he say when?" Lila hesitated. That told us everything. "When you agree," Mara finished. Lila nodded. Owen turned away. I held my face still. Because here was the truth we'd been circling without naming. He didn't just want bodies. He wanted consent. Not real consent. Something close enough to let him pretend. That was the final stage. "He's lying," I said calmly. Lila looked at me for the first time since she'd come back. Really looked. "He says you're dangerous," she whispered. "He says you're angry and you'll get us all hurt." I almost smiled. "Of course he does," I replied. "I am." Mara put a hand on Lila's arm. Firm, grounding. "He told me the same thing," she said, "and before me, someone else." Lila's breath hitched. "What happened to her?" Mara didn't answer right away. Then she said, "She stopped being herself. That's how he let her go." "Go where?" Lila asked. Mara's jaw tightened. "Exactly." That night, Lila didn't sleep. Neither did I. We sat together, backs against the wall, while the others kept watch. "He said I could shower whenever I want," Lila said quietly. "He said I could wear normal clothes." "That's not freedom," I said. "That's relocation." She swallowed. "I'm so tired." I didn't argue with that. Instead, I said, "So am I. That's why we don't give up now." The plan changed that night. Not in structure, in urgency. We couldn't wait for the system to break naturally. We couldn't wait for mistakes. He was accelerating. And when predators accelerate, it's because they sense a shift. Lila was the pressure point, which meant she was also the key. Owen spoke just before dawn. "There's a window," he said. "Not outside. In him." We turned to him. "He believes he's inevitable," Owen continued. "That time is on his side. That people break if you wait long enough." Mara nodded. "They usually do." "Then we stop waiting," I said. They looked at me. I didn't soften it. "We interrupt his process. We make him rush. And when he rushes, he cuts corners." Silence. Then Lila spoke, barely above breath. "I'll pretend," she said. Mara stiffened. "No." "I can," Lila insisted. "I already know what he wants to hear." That's when I understood something painful and necessary. Lila wasn't weak, she was adaptive, and that meant she could survive something the rest of us couldn't, playing along. We didn't vote. This wasn't democracy, this was triage. We prepared her carefully, not with hope, with instructions, what to say, what not to promise. What details to remember? "Look down," Mara said. "Not too much. He likes eye contact when he thinks he's winning." "Ask questions," Owen added, "but only about him." I took her hands. "Whatever happens," I said, steady and clear, You don't belong to him. Not upstairs. Not anywhere. She nodded. Not bravely. Precisely. When he came for her again, she stood before he asked. He smiled. And for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something real cross his face. Anticipation. That was the moment I knew we were close to something irreversible. Because men like him don't fear resistance. They fear interruption. And we were about to tear a hole straight through the story he told himself. Survival is expensive. Not in the ways people like to imagine. Not courage. Not strength. It costs pieces of you that don't grow back cleanly. It costs timing. It costs silence. It costs deciding who pays first. When Lila started going upstairs, the house changed its rhythm. He moved faster, slept less, checked the basement more often, but with less care. Confidence makes men sloppy. Anticipation makes them impatient. That impatience was our opening. Lila became a messenger without ever saying she would. Information came back in fragments, tucked between breaths, hidden in the way she stood, or where her eyes went first when she returned. The upstairs hallway had one window, frosted glass, not sealed, the spare bedroom lock caught if turned too hard. Keys hung behind the pantry door. Same order. Every time. She never told us everything at once. That was instinct, not instruction. If something went wrong, no single moment would give us away. I watched her carefully. Not for fear, for absence. She stopped flinching after the first week. That terrified me. Flinching means your body still believes pain can be avoided. When it stops, it's because something inside has recalculated the cost of reaction. She wasn't broken. She was adapting. That kind of adaptation saves lives and erases parts of people. Mara hardened as the days passed. Not cruel. Precise. The closer we get, she told me, the less room there is for kindness. I didn't argue. Kindness is a luxury item in places like that. Owen worked constantly now. Palms against walls, ear to pipes, eyes closed, counting vibration. There's a delay, he said one night, between the generator cycling and the upstairs light stabilizing. How long? I asked. 8 seconds, he replied. 8 seconds isn't long. It's enough. He started trusting Lila. That was the most dangerous phase. Trust makes people careless. It convinces them they've already won. He let her help prepare food once, let her hold a knife. She didn't shake, didn't rush, didn't linger. She handed it back like it meant nothing. He smiled. I memorized that smile. I wanted to remember exactly what confidence looked like on him, so I could recognize the moment it disappeared. Then he brought someone new. We heard the car before anything else. Different engine, different weight. A woman's voice upstairs, polite, uncertain. The basement went silent. Mara closed her eyes. He's accelerating, she said. That's never good. Lila came back pale, but steady. He says she won't stay, she whispered. He says she's just passing through. That's not how this ends, Owen said. No, I agreed. That's how it speeds up. We didn't have time anymore. The plan we'd been shaping slowly had to be finalized without refinement. No perfect alignment, no extra data, just enough. Someone would have to draw him off. Someone would have to stay in his sight long enough for the rest to move. Mara didn't hesitate. You, she said to me. I nodded. Lila grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. No, she said. Not quietly, not carefully. You already paid, I told her. This part's mine. That wasn't bravery. That was accounting. The plan was simple because complex plans break under stress. When the generator cycled, Owen would damage the basement lock, not open it, break it so it couldn't be secured quickly. Mara would take Lila and move, hide, delay, stay unseen. I would go upstairs, willingly. The idea settled in my chest like a weight that didn't argue. We waited. The hum dipped. Lights flickered. 8 seconds. Metal screamed as Owen forced the mechanism. Not clean, not quiet. Enough. Footsteps thundered above us. I moved before anyone could stop me. The basement door opened, and for the first time since the day I married him, I chose the direction of my own movement. Up. Not because I believed I'd survive it, because survival had stopped being the point. The air upstairs felt thinner, not cleaner, not freer, just different, like a place that had forgotten how to hold people without swallowing them. He turned when he saw me. No surprise, No anger, curiosity. That was worse. You decided to come up, he said calmly, like I'd chosen a seat at the table. Yes, I replied. My voice didn't shake. That wasn't bravery. That was depletion. When fear runs out, something steadier takes its place. He studied me for a long moment. I let him believe this was his scene to control. You're early, he said finally. I didn't want to miss anything, I answered. That earned a smile, small, genuine. He gestured toward the chair. I didn't sit. That was my first refusal. He circled slowly, like he was adjusting to a new variable. You think you're protecting them? He said. That's admirable. Misguided, but admirable. I'm not protecting anyone, I said. I'm interrupting you. The word landed. I saw it in his eyes. A flicker of recalculation. He didn't like language that reframed the situation without permission. Interruptions end badly, he said. So do routines, I replied. The house made noise around us. Not dramatic noise. Subtle ones. A pipe rattling where it shouldn't. A faint echo that suggested movement below. He noticed. His head tilted slightly. Stay here, he said, tone sharpening just enough to matter. I didn't move. That was my second refusal. He stepped closer. Not threatening. Assessing distance. Options. You were always more observant than the others, he said. That's why this hurts you more. I met his eyes. No, I said. It hurts you more, because I see you clearly. That did it. Not rage, not violence, impatience. He turned away from me and moved toward the hallway. That was the opening. The generator hiccuped again. Lights dimmed. 8 seconds. I didn't run. I spoke. You don't own endings, I said loudly. You just delay them. He spun back, irritation flashing openly now. What did you do? He demanded. Nothing, I said. I let time catch up to you. A sound rose from below. Metal. Wood. A door protesting damage it couldn't recover from quickly. His control fractured in real time. He moved fast then. Too fast. Predators don't like uncertainty. It makes them visible. I stepped into his path. That was my third refusal. The struggle was brief. Not cinematic. Not fair. He underestimated exhaustion. Mine and his. I went down hard. So did he. The sound of glass breaking somewhere nearby told me everything I needed to know. The woods outside answered with silence. Then, a scream. Not from me, from someone who hadn't planned to witness anything at all. Lights burst back on. Too late. The front door stood open. Cold air rushed in like judgment. He froze. I smiled for the first time since the basement. You rushed, I told him. That's always the mistake. I didn't stay to see how it ended. I heard Mara's voice. Owen's. Lila's breath, fast and alive. I ran barefoot into the trees. Branches tore at my skin. Gravel bit. Cold burned. I didn't stop. Behind me, the house lost its shape, its authority, its silence. Somewhere far off, sirens began to argue with the night. The woods didn't answer. They never do. But for the first time, neither did he. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with relief or music or the sense that everything is finally over. It arrives disoriented, cold, suspicious, like something you don't trust yet because it's never kept you alive before. I ran until my lungs burned and then I ran some more. When I finally collapsed, it wasn't because I felt safe, it was because my body refused to move again. The woods smelled like wet leaves and blood that wasn't mine. My feet were shredded. My hands shook so badly I had to sit on them. Somewhere behind me, the house still existed. That mattered more than I wanted it to. They found me just before dawn. Flashlights first, voices second, hands last. I remember flinching when someone touched my shoulder. I remember saying don't without knowing who I was talking to. I remember a woman's voice repeating my name like it had always belonged to her. It hadn't. I didn't give statements right away. I couldn't. My mouth worked, but my mind was somewhere else, still underground, still counting doors. They wrapped me in a blanket and asked gentle questions that landed like static. What's your husband's name? How long were you there? Are there others? I answered the last one first. Yes. That was the only word that came out clean. Hospitals are strange places for people who've been controlled. Everything is optional. Everything requires consent. Even water. They asked before touching me, explained procedures, waited for answers. I didn't know what to do with that. When a nurse asked, "Is it okay if I check your vitals?" I stared at her like it was a trick. She waited. That undid me more than anything else. Mara didn't come to the hospital. Owen did, briefly. Long enough to confirm Lila was alive, long enough to look at me and nod once. We didn't hug. That wasn't who we were. Lila came later. Quiet. Wrapped in someone else's jacket. She sat beside my bed and held my hand like it was proof of something fragile but real. "He keeps asking for you," she said. "Who?" I asked. "The detective." I nodded. "Tell him I'll talk when I can say it straight." She understood. She always had. The interviews came in waves. Local police, state, federal, different badges. Same hunger. They wanted timelines, motives, psychology. They wanted a monster they could outline cleanly. I gave them facts, addresses, routines, names. I didn't give them metaphors. That disappointed some of them. "You're very composed," one man said. "I'm exhausted," I replied. "There's a difference." He didn't write that down. The house made the news. They called it remote, isolated, hidden. They said things like no one could have known. That part made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. People love believing monsters are rare, that they live far away, that they announce themselves with warning signs and obvious cruelty. The truth is harder to swallow. He lived quietly, paid taxes, had neighbors who waved. He didn't disappear. He blended. They asked why I married him. That question came up more than any other. I answered it once, carefully, and then never again. "I married the version of him that existed in daylight," I said. "That's the one he meant me to see." They didn't like that answer. It didn't assign blame cleanly. Recovery was not linear. Some days I felt solid, present, real. Other days I couldn't stand the sound of keys, or locks, or footsteps behind me, even when I knew they belonged to nurses. I slept with the lights on, then with them off, then on again. Progress is not a straight line. It's a series of negotiations with your nervous system. Lila asked me once if I thought he'd ever get out. I didn't reassure her. I told her the truth. "I don't know," I said, "but I know he doesn't get to define us anymore." She nodded slowly. That was enough. The world kept moving. Cars passed. People argued about things that had nothing to do with basements or woods. That was the strangest part. The normalcy. It felt obscene at first. Then it felt like a gift I wasn't sure I deserved yet. I took it anyway. Because survival, I'd learned, doesn't wait for permission. There's a moment after trauma when the world decides it's done with your story. Not because it's resolved, because it's tired. The sirens stop. The headlines shrink. The questions become less urgent, then procedural, then polite. Eventually, they stop altogether. That's when the real work begins. The trial didn't happen the way people imagine. There was no dramatic unraveling, no single sentence that collapsed him into something small. He didn't confess. He didn't deny in any way that mattered. He watched, he listened, he adjusted. Even in court, he treated it like a system. I testified once, only once. I stood, swore to tell the truth, and gave them facts without emotion. Not because I didn't feel it, but because emotion was something he'd always tried to harvest. I wasn't feeding him anymore. When the prosecutor asked how I felt when I realized who he really was, I answered honestly. "I didn't realize," I said. I recalibrated. That word landed wrong in the room. Too technical. Too cold. Good. They wanted tears. They got clarity. They wanted horror. They got structure. Monsters hate structure when it's not theirs. Afterward, people told me I was brave. I didn't correct them, but I didn't accept it either. Bravery implies choice. Most of what I did was necessity. You don't call it bravery when someone swims because the boat is gone. You call it physics. Mara disappeared. Not in a tragic way, in a deliberate one. She left town before the trial ended. No forwarding address, no explanation. Just a note written in block letters and left with someone who knew how to find me. Some people survive by staying visible. Others survive by leaving no outline. I understood. Owen stayed long enough to testify, long enough to make sure the facts were anchored. Then he went quiet. Not vanished. Just distant. Like someone who had returned to a life that no longer needed to explain itself. Lila stayed in touch, carefully, on her terms. Sometimes she texted just a single word, still here. Sometimes weeks passed with nothing. That was fine. Survival doesn't owe anyone consistency. I moved. Not far, but far enough. I didn't keep the house. I didn't keep the furniture. I didn't keep the name. I kept my body. That felt like enough. People asked if I forgave him. That question never goes away. It just gets asked with better manners. No, I said. I released him. They thought that meant forgiveness. It didn't. It meant I stopped carrying him where he didn't belong. Some nights I still wake up counting doors, seconds, breaths. I let myself. The counting saved me once. I won't shame it now. Other nights I sleep through until morning and don't remember dreaming at all. Those nights feel like progress. The woods still exist. The house still exists. Evil doesn't evaporate just because it's named, but it loses efficiency. It loses secrecy. It loses its favorite currency, silence. That matters. I don't tell my story often, not because it hurts, because it works. It does something to people when you refuse to soften it for them, when you don't offer comfort at the end, when you don't promise closure. Some people lean in, some people look away. Both reactions are information. I'm not who I was before. I don't want to be, but I am precise now, boundaried, unmistakably present. And if there's one thing I know with certainty, it's this. He thought survival ended when escape began. He was wrong, because survival isn't a moment. It's a practice. And I'm still practicing. People expect endings to close things. A verdict, a sentence, a final door. That's not how it works. Endings don't seal trauma. They expose what survives it. I don't track the dates anymore. I know when seasons change because my body tells me first. Cold still makes me alert. Silence still sharpens my hearing. I notice exits without meaning to. That hasn't gone away. It doesn't need to. Hypervigilance is only a flaw if you pretend the world is safe. I don't pretend. He writes letters. Not often, not emotional, always measured. He never apologizes. He never threatens. He never asks directly for forgiveness. He explains. That's the pattern. I don't read them. That's the boundary. Some people need to understand in order to move on. Others need to refuse the conversation entirely. I chose refusal. That's not denial. That's authority. Lila is older now, not just in years, in posture, in how she takes up space without permission. She doesn't ask before she speaks. She doesn't lower her eyes when she shouldn't. Once, over coffee, she said, "I don't think I would have survived if you hadn't gone upstairs that night." I didn't correct her, not because she was right, but because she needed that version of the story. Survivors get to decide which truths they carry. Mara never reached out again. I don't look for her. People like her don't vanish because they're lost. They vanish because they're done. I respect that. Owen sent one message 2 years later. I fixed something today. Thought you'd understand. I did. There are moments, rare ones, when I catch myself laughing without checking the room first. Those moments surprise me. They don't feel like healing. They feel like territory reclaimed. I don't speak at conferences. I don't join panels. I don't offer advice that fits on a poster. I talk when it matters. I listen more than that. When someone tells me they miss the person they were before, I don't comfort them. I say, "Good. That means you survived." The house in the woods was torn down. People ask if that helped. It didn't. Buildings are never the problem. What helped was exposure, witnesses, records, noise. Predators don't disappear when you destroy their lairs. They disappear when you take away their silence. Sometimes I walk through forests, not to prove anything, To remind myself that trees don't conspire, they don't hide intent, they don't pretend to be something they're not. The woods didn't betray me. A man did. That distinction matters. If you're waiting for me to say it's over, I won't. Because survival doesn't end. It evolves. I don't live in fear. I live in awareness. Those are not the same. He thought marriage made me his. He thought isolation made me manageable. He thought patience would erase resistance. He was wrong about all of it. Because what he never understood, what men like him never do, is this. Control depends on belief. And belief collapses the moment someone chooses clarity over comfort. I chose clarity. Every day after that was mine.